The gavel drops. Silence. Judge Caprio's hand trembles. His eyes glisten. The courtroom holds its breath. Your Honor, The woman's voice cracks. She can't continue. A tear rolls down the judge's weathered face. Another. Then another. The bailiff looks away. The court reporter stops typing. Everyone sees it. The most compassionate judge in America is crying. But nobody knows why. Not yet. What happens when a single mother's story is so heartbreaking that even the kindest judge in the world can't hold back his tears? When Judge Frank Caprio heard what this woman had sacrificed for her children, the entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. What he did next would restore everyone's faith in humanity. It was a typical Tuesday morning at Providence Municipal Court. The docket was full: parking violations, traffic tickets, the usual stream of people trying to explain why they broke the law. Judge Frank Caprio sat at his bench with that familiar warmth in his eyes, ready to dispense justice with compassion, as he'd done for over 3 decades. Case #4-782 was called. Sarah Martinez, parking in a handicapped zone without proper identification. A woman in her mid-30s walked to the podium. Her clothes were clean but worn. Her shoes had seen better days. Dark circles under her eyes told a story of sleepless nights. She carried herself with dignity despite the obvious weight she was carrying. Judge Caprio looked at the file, then at her. Ms. Martinez, it says here you parked in a handicapped spot at Rhode Island Hospital. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But Judge Caprio noticed something. Her hands were shaking. Do you have a handicapped placard? He asked gently. No, Your Honor. I don't. The prosecutor stood up, ready to present the city's case. It was straightforward: illegal parking, $275 fine, case closed. But Judge Caprio raised his hand. Before we proceed, I'd like to understand something. Why were you at the hospital that day? Sarah hesitated. Her lips quivered. She looked down at her trembling hands, gathering courage. My daughter, Your Honor. She has leukemia. The courtroom temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Judge Caprio leaned forward. I'm so sorry to hear that. How old is your daughter? 7, Your Honor. Isabella just turned 7 3 weeks ago. Sarah's voice cracked on the name. And you were taking her for treatment? Yes, sir. Chemotherapy. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months. Nobody in the courtroom was prepared for what came next. Judge Caprio's expression softened even more. Ms. Martinez, I see you drove from Pawtucket. That's quite a distance. Why didn't you park in the regular lot? This is when Sarah's composure began to crumble. She took a deep breath, fighting back tears. I couldn't carry her that far, Your Honor. Couldn't carry her? The chemo makes her so weak. She's only 42 pounds now. She used to be 58. And I work 2 jobs, so by the time I pick her up from my mother's house and drive to the hospital, I'm exhausted too. The handicapped spot was closer to the entrance. I thought I could just run in and run out. But there was more. So much more. Judge Caprio glanced at the ticket. It says here you were parked there for 3 hours. Sarah nodded, tears now flowing freely. The treatment took longer than expected. Isabella had a reaction. They had to monitor her. Were you with her the whole time? Yes, Your Honor. I can't leave her alone when she's scared. The judge paused. He looked at the paper in front of him, then back at Sarah. You mentioned you work 2 jobs. What do you do? This is when Judge Caprio's voice began to shake. I clean offices at night, Your Honor. From 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Then I work at a grocery store during the day, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's the only schedule that lets me take Isabella to treatments and still pay the bills. What about Isabella's father? Judge Caprio asked gently. Sarah's jaw tightened. He left when we got the diagnosis. Said he couldn't handle it. We haven't seen him in 5 months. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor sat down, no longer interested in presenting a case. So you're doing this alone? Judge Caprio's voice was softer now. Yes, sir. My mother helps when she can, but she's 68 and has her own health problems. It's mostly just me and Isabella. Subscribe right now and comment what you think Judge Caprio should do, because what happens next will absolutely move you to tears. Judge Caprio removed his glasses. He rubbed his eyes. When he looked up, everyone could see they were red. Ms. Martinez, how much sleep do you get? The question seemed to surprise her. Maybe 3 or 4 hours, Your Honor. Sometimes less when Isabella has bad nights. And you're paying for all the medical bills? We have insurance, but the co-pays, the medications she needs that aren't covered, it's about $800 a month on top of everything else. I'm behind on rent. Behind on the electric bill. But as long as Isabella gets her treatment, nothing else matters. But Judge Caprio wasn't done asking questions. Sarah, may I call you Sarah? Yes, Your Honor. Sarah, tell me about Isabella. What's she like when she's not sick? This question broke something in Sarah. Her face transformed. Through her tears, a smile emerged. She's beautiful, Your Honor. She loves to draw. Even now, even when she's so tired she can barely hold a crayon, she draws. She draws herself as a superhero, fighting the bad cells in her body. She tells me she's going to be strong again. She tells me not to worry. Judge Caprio's hand went to his face. His eyes were glistening. She sounds like an amazing little girl. She is, Your Honor. She's my whole world. When they told us about the cancer, I promised her I would do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Sarah emphasized each word. So yes, I parked illegally. And if I have to do it again to get my daughter to treatment on time, to save her even a few steps of walking when she's in pain, I'll do it. I'll pay whatever fine you give me. I'll figure it out somehow. What Judge Caprio did next left everyone speechless. The judge was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the ticket. He looked at Sarah. He looked at the calculator on his bench where he typically computed fines. Then he did something he rarely did. He stood up. The entire courtroom stood with him out of respect. But Judge Caprio wasn't following protocol. He walked down from his bench, something judges almost never do. He walked directly to Sarah. And in front of everyone, this 85-year-old judge, this man who had seen thousands of cases, reached into his own pocket. How much is the fine? He asked the clerk without taking his eyes off Sarah. $275, Your Honor. Judge Caprio pulled out his wallet. He counted out $300 in bills. The fine is dismissed, he said, his voice thick with emotion. This covers it, and I want you to use the extra $25 for gas. For getting Isabella to her next treatment. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. Your Honor, I can't, you can't. I absolutely can, and I am. Judge Caprio's voice was firm now. Sarah, you are doing something far more important than any of us in this courtroom. You're fighting for your daughter's life. The last thing you should be worrying about is a parking ticket. Tears were streaming down both their faces now. The court reporter had stopped pretending to work. The bailiff was wiping his eyes. People in the gallery were crying openly. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He turned to address the courtroom. Is there anyone here from Rhode Island Hospital administration? A woman in the back raised her hand hesitantly. I'm from Hospital Parking Management, Your Honor. Good. I want you to issue Ms. Martinez a temporary handicapped parking permit immediately. And I want it expedited. Can you do that? Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. Judge Caprio turned back to Sarah. You won't have to worry about this anymore. You park wherever you need to park. You take care of Isabella. Sarah was sobbing now. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Judge Caprio placed his hand on her shoulder. But I want you to promise me something. Anything, Your Honor. Promise me you'll take care of yourself too. Isabella needs her mother healthy. Can you promise me that? Sarah nodded through her tears. I promise. Nobody in that courtroom had ever seen anything like it. Judge Caprio returned to his bench, but before he sat down, he addressed the room one more time. Let me tell you all something. We see a lot of cases in this courtroom. Some people park illegally because they're lazy. Some because they're inconsiderate. But some park illegally because they're fighting a battle the rest of us can't even imagine. Sarah is a hero. She's working 2 jobs, sleeping 3 hours a night, and still showing up every single day for her daughter. That's not a criminal. That's a saint. The courtroom erupted in applause. It started slow, then built into a standing ovation. Sarah stood there, overwhelmed, unable to process what had just happened. The prosecutor approached the bench. Your Honor, the city would like to dismiss all charges officially and establish a special accommodation fund for situations like this. Judge Caprio nodded approvingly. Make it happen. But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. As Sarah prepared to leave the courtroom, Judge Caprio called her back. One more thing, Sarah. My clerk is going to give you some information. My wife and I want to help with Isabella's medical expenses. And I'm going to make some calls. You shouldn't have to choose between paying rent and getting your daughter medicine. Sarah couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears flowing. After court adjourned, the video of the interaction went viral. Within 24 hours, it had 50 million views. Within 48 hours, it had been shared in 120 countries. Share this video right now if you believe kindness and compassion should always win over rules and regulations. Comment below if Judge Caprio restored your faith in humanity. The response was overwhelming. A GoFundMe campaign for Isabella's treatment raised $2.3 million in 3 days. Rhode Island Hospital announced a new policy. Parents with children receiving cancer treatment would receive free parking passes. Other hospitals across the country followed suit. Sarah received dozens of job offers with better hours and better pay. A local businessman offered her a position with full benefits and a flexible schedule so she could care for Isabella. But perhaps most importantly, Isabella's story brought attention to the gaps in healthcare coverage for childhood cancer treatment. Legislators in Rhode Island introduced a bill to increase support for families dealing with pediatric cancer. 3 months later, Sarah and Isabella returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom. But this time, they weren't there for a violation. They were there to say thank you. Isabella walked in holding her mother's hand. She was wearing a pink dress. Her hair had started growing back. She carried a drawing. Judge Caprio came down from his bench again. He knelt down to Isabella's level. Hi, Isabella. I've heard so much about you. Isabella handed him the drawing. It showed 2 superheroes, one small, one with white hair and a judge's robe. That's you, Isabella said, pointing to the judge. You helped Mommy help me fight the bad cells. Judge Caprio's eyes filled with tears again. He looked at Sarah. How is she doing? The doctors say the cancer is in remission. They say it's a miracle. It's not a miracle, Judge Caprio said, looking at Sarah with profound respect. It's love. It's a mother's love and a mother's sacrifice. That's the most powerful force in the universe. The lesson that day wasn't about parking tickets or legal procedures. It was about seeing people. Really seeing them. Understanding that behind every infraction might be a story of struggle. That justice without mercy isn't justice at all. That sometimes the most important thing a person in power can do is simply care. Judge Frank Caprio had spent his career showing that the law could be applied with compassion. That courtrooms could be places of healing, not just punishment. That a judge could look at the whole person, not just the violation. Years later, when asked about that day, Judge Caprio said something profound. People asked me why I helped Sarah. Why I paid her fine. Why I got emotional. But they're asking the wrong question. The right question is, how could I not? When you see someone sacrificing everything for someone they love, when you see pure selflessness in action, you don't think about rules or procedures. You think about humanity. And you do whatever small thing you can to help. Sarah and Isabella's story became a symbol. A symbol that even in the darkest moments, when everything seems impossible, there are still good people in the world. People who will stand up for you. People who will see your struggle and help carry the weight. And it all started with a parking ticket. The case of Sarah Martinez was closed officially, but its impact would be felt for generations. It reminded everyone that behind every person standing in a courtroom is a human being with a story. And sometimes, the greatest act of justice is simply showing someone they're not alone. Judge Caprio continued his work, treating each case with the same compassion he'd shown Sarah. But he often thought about that Tuesday morning. About a mother's love. About a little girl's courage. About how a simple act of kindness can change everything. Because in the end, that's what leadership truly is, using your power not to dominate, but to uplift. Not to punish, but to help. Not to enforce rules blindly, but to see the human being standing before you and respond with your heart. Judge Frank Caprio taught us that day that the most important quality in a leader isn't authority. It's compassion. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is cry alongside someone who's hurting, and then do everything in your power to ease their pain. But there's more to this story that most people never heard. 6 months later, Judge Caprio received a letter in crayon. Dear Judge Caprio, my name is Isabella. I am 7.5 now. The doctors say I am getting better. You are a superhero. Love, Isabella. Judge Caprio kept that letter in his desk drawer. On difficult days, he would take it out and remember why he became a judge. The ripple effects continued to spread. The hospital parking policy inspired by Sarah's case helped 847 other families in the first year. Parents drowning in medical bills no longer worried about parking tickets when rushing their sick children to treatment. Dr. Michael Chen, Chief of Pediatric Oncology, noted, "We've seen a measurable decrease in stress-related complications in our patients' families. Parents can focus on healing instead of worrying about tickets." In Sarah's life, the transformation was remarkable. Her new job came with insurance that covered Isabella's treatments completely. No more choosing between rent and medication. No more 3-hour nights. "I remember when I realized I could sleep a full night," Sarah said months later. "I woke up at 7 a.m. and panicked, thinking I'd missed something. Then I realized I hadn't. For the first time in a year, I had just slept. I cried from relief." Sarah started a support group for single parents dealing with childhood illness. Every Tuesday evening, she opened her home to families who needed someone who understood. "Judge Caprio showed me that when you've been helped, you help others," she explained. "That's how kindness multiplies." Isabella's recovery became a beacon of hope. Her oncologist called it remarkable. When the parents' stress decreased, Isabella responded better to treatment. She returned to school, joined the art club, kept drawing superheroes with capes. The story reached beyond Rhode Island. Judges across America began implementing Caprio clinics, connecting defendants with social services rather than just punishing them. Judge Martinez in Texas started programs connecting people with community resources. Judge O'Brien in Massachusetts created systems where people could address root causes through counseling and job training. Frank showed us that the bench doesn't have to be a barrier. Judge Martinez said, "It can be a bridge." But Judge Caprio remained humble. "I didn't do anything special. I just saw a mother fighting for her child." The fact that people think it's extraordinary says more about our society than it does about me. The bailiff who witnessed it all, Officer Tom Reynolds, disagreed. "I've worked here 22 years. Judge Caprio cries when he sees pure love in action. But here's the thing, it doesn't make him weak. It makes him strong. Because after he cries, he acts. He finds solutions. That's real strength." The power came from authenticity. Judge Caprio didn't cry for cameras. He cried because he's a father, a grandfather, someone who understands sacrifice. "My wife and I raised 5 children," he explained. "I know what it's like to worry. When I see someone like Sarah, I don't see a parking violator. I see every parent who's ever been afraid." Including myself. 3 years later, the impact continued. Isabella, now 10 years old and cancer-free for 2 years, started a program called Kids Helping Kids. She visits pediatric oncology wards, bringing her drawings and her story of hope. Sarah accompanied her daughter on these visits, now working as a patient advocate at the very hospital where her nightmare began. Judge Caprio continued his work, one case at a time. He still cries occasionally. He still pays fines out of his own pocket when he sees someone who needs help more than punishment. He still comes down from his bench to look people in the eye and tell them they matter. Justice isn't just about the law, he often says. It's about wisdom. It's about understanding that every person who walks through that courtroom door is fighting a battle we know nothing about. The legacy of Sarah and Isabella's case lives on. It's in every parent who can now park near the hospital entrance without fear. It's in every judge who asks, why, before asking, how much. It's in every courtroom where compassion and justice walk hand in hand. Because Judge Frank Caprio didn't just dismiss a parking ticket that day. He restored faith in humanity. He proved that the system can work for people, not against them. He showed that leadership isn't about power, it's about service. And he did it all by doing something beautifully simple. He let himself feel. He let himself care. He let himself cry. And then he acted on that compassion with everything he had. That's the lesson that echoes far beyond any courtroom. That's the leadership the world desperately needs. That's why Judge Frank Caprio's tears that day mattered so much. Because they were real, they led to action, and they reminded us all of what we're capable of when we lead with our hearts.